I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The Deferred Sales Trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Friday edition of the Deferred Sales Trust Mastermind and Masterclass, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options, and not having a clear plan is the enemy. And using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated real estate businesses, cryptocurrency, could be stock, it could be artwork, it could be NFTs. It could be really anything that has at least $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain. It's got to be big enough to qualify for the Deferred Sales Trust. But when you do that, you can unlock these freedoms for your wealth plan, unlock the ability to have maybe some retirement freedom, maybe some time and energy freedom, maybe some entrepreneurial freedom, some estate tax freedom, the dreaded 1031 exchange freedom, right? Where you just don't want to feel trapped by overpaying for properties. And a few others. In fact, we're going over today the 10 top freedoms for the Deferred Sales Trust. In fact, we're going to put a little in the chat. We're going to put a little vote here in a minute. We're not going to have time to dive into all particular 10, but we will talk about, at least announce what the 10 are, and then we'll kind of do a little bit of deep dive on one or two of these freedoms, because at the end of the day, what we're here to do is to try to make simple what can be kind of complex, and also bring some creativity where people can kind of feel power, kind of like powerlessness. They feel frustrated because of what? 25 to 50% of your gain on the sale of your asset is going to be taxed. And it's capital gains tax and it's depreciation recapture. And that's a huge part of your exit, right? So you can spend your time and energy building a business, making a great investment, building real estate, just to see it, wiped out or cut in half. And that's huge. If you can spend some time and energy to focus on the exit plan, and so that you can achieve whatever you're trying to achieve, right? So that being said, I am joined by some amazing people. And for those who don't know me, my name is Brett Swarts, by the way, and I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. We also started the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, and we have the YouTube channel and other cool things coming out, like a new book coming out. But I'm also joined by some amazing strategic alliances, and they're here to share their wisdom. The first one being the Jake Miller. He's our go-to financial advisor for all of our Deferred Sales Trust. Jake, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, Brett, and I'm happy to be here. And by the way, thank you for connecting me with some other financial advisors the other day. We were able to solve a problem for a joint client and make it work.
Exactly. And that's the key here, is the team effort, right? And in fact, Jake, he's a CFP, as well as he has a growing organization of financial advisors. As well, he trains and coached CPAs on advanced tax strategies. It's funny that the CPAs were going to Jake. It's not funny once you know Jake, but it is interesting because you want to have different perspectives. And Jake has a great way of thinking and looking at ways of solving problems. And that's what's great about Jake. He's not just a financial advisor in the box. He is a problem solver. And that's why he's top of our list for strategic alliances. We also have some real estate professionals and / becoming capital gains tax solutions experts. Pierce York. Is Pierce in the house today? I see his name there. He might be on the beach again. Newport Beach is where he's at. Oh, there he is. Pierce, how are we doing, brother?
We are doing all right. We are coming over the stomach bug that just wiped out the family. So we're going through the recovery process right now. Yeah. I know you're laughing because you've been there, but yeah, it's not been fun.
Exactly. I'm sorry to hear that, Pierce. And Pierce is, by the way, co-hosts the podcast, and he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting there as we spread the gospel of the Deferred Sales Trust, if you will, right, on how this works. But we also bring on amazing guests on our show. So if you're a crypto expert, if you are a financial expert, real estate expert, you're in the real estate industry, business brokerage, M&A, anything, even leadership, right? We bring on some of the best, because what we really do believe is that when the leader gets better, everything gets better. And in particular, having the right connections and the right people. We don't have a money problem, we have a people problem, right? We want great people that we can call on. And so that's part of the podcast as well, not only to learn these type of secrets and different things to share, but also to be connected with. So check out our podcast as well, Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, from our amazing guests. We also have the Rebecca Munson. It's been a little while. Hopefully she's been on vacation building some houses. She's our go-to Truckee Tahoe luxury real estate expert there. She's on the ground and she's been there and she's selling. Rebecca, how are you doing today?
Doing well in my new home, sitting here, still trying to figure out the whole thing, but yeah, all is good.
Congratulations. And we see you got a new setup there, right? I see that ring light in the back. You're getting ready to light that thing up. That is so cool. How does it feel to be in the new spot?
Pretty amazing, pretty nerve-wracking too. So more of that later, but that's okay. But I love being back in my hometown. Snow's on the ground. Ski resorts are open. It's exciting. Yeah,
I love it. I love it. And so that being said, I'll talk a little bit about the kind of the structure of our call. We talked a little bit about the vision, right? And then we're going to dive into a deal story, close of the week, or a live deal that we're working on. We're also going to try to just share our journey, because the biggest thing is just sharing the objections and the challenges not only clients are facing, but also what they're facing with overcoming what we call false beliefs with the Deferred Sales Trust. It's the 3 to 10 most common questions, and we'll go over those as well with you live, and then we'll actually kind of role play. Jake and I will, maybe even Pierce as well, if he's up for it, and Rebecca as well. And then we'll open up for questions, your live questions about the Deferred Sales Trust, anything we talked about. But before we go into that, we're going to dive into a few of these freedoms. And then Jake and I are going to teach you a little bit about what these freedoms can do for you and for your clients. And so we're going to start with, I'm just going to list kind of the 10 freedoms that I'm working with, right? And these are things that we've seen over our time period of closing these transactions. By the way, if you want to get a copy of our ebook, we actually have deal stories in our ebook that break down some major ones. I think at least 5 or 6 or 7 in the ebook, and we keep growing the ebook. So even if you've downloaded it before, we're updating that. So look for the update. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and the ebook pop-up will be right there. You can download the ebook for free. All right, so let's start with some of the top freedoms. So one of them that you might not think about is called the partnership freedom. The partnership freedom. Right. So you might be in a partnership right now, or you might be approaching selling something. And guess what? Not all partners want to sell at the same time. And nor do they all want to travel to the next deal or opportunity. In fact, they might have different risk tolerances. They might have different needs. They might be in a different lifestyle stage. Right. And so to be able to separate a partnership in a way that defers capital gains tax can be the difference between partners completely being at odds and it's a battle to hey, if I don't have to pay capital gains tax right away and I can defer and earn interest and build wealth with it, and we can still separate in a beneficial way for both of us. In other words, it's a win-win for both of us, then great, right? So we've seen the Deferred Sales Trust unlock what's called partnership freedom, realizing that other assets or other strategies with certain assets, it's just not even possible, right? In other words, the whole entity must move, such as like a 1031 exchange. Generally, all the partners must go. And that creates tension and stress, and especially in today's marketplace with rising interest rates and differing changing needs. So Jake, talk about partnership freedom and the value that that can bring to someone who's listening right now that has a client or actually is the person in a partnership.
Absolutely. As you've mentioned, sometimes there's some stickiness in some of these other strategies that erroneously people try to force because they don't know what the other options are. Within the Deferred Sales Trust, there's freedom to choose. Individually, one decision or one stance might be different than it is for another partner. The partners may not want to be partners anymore also. That occasionally happens. It might have made sense for them to be partners on this office building, but as they sell and they receive the proceeds of that, it might not make sense to go into another. Maybe for one of them, but maybe the other wants to go into all-time low, the stock market, or crypto, or they want to get into horse racing. Whatever it is, they have the freedom to choose how to receive the proceeds and then how to reinvest within the Deferred Sales Trust.
Excellent. Rebecca, I'm going to call on you here to test your knowledge, right? So Rebecca, you have a client that they have a luxury Airbnb in Incline Village. Let's say, speaking on the California side, because let's add a little bit more tax. Let's add another 13.3%, okay? And it's California side, but it's a $20 million asset, and there's two partners, Rebecca. Does that mean if they want to use a deferred sales trust, that not only can each of them use it, but are they going into the same trust, or what's happening there?
So they can use the deferred sales trust. They, as partners, can divide up and have their own deferred sales trust, which is ideally because they most likely will have different investment goals, maybe different life goals. So that's why they'd want to do that.
Exactly. And so each individual or married couple would have their own trust. So let's say it's $20 million. Let's say it was a $5 million basis. It was a $15 million gain, right? State of California, federal with Obamacare, looking at a minimum of 37, probably 40% of that 15 million would have been taxed. And so they're like, I don't want to sell. I don't want a 1031. It's hard to find another $20+ million deal on the Lake Tahoe, especially to make sense of rents. That's why we maybe haven't sold yet. Interest rates are higher, a lot of things. So how about we put it into our own individual trust? Just make it simple, 10 million in each. We've deferred about 40% of the gain, which is pretty sweet, right? And now each of them can go their separate ways. And this one could have money coming out right away. This one can delay it, right? They could go back into a business venture, or they could go back into real estate. They could just have it all in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds and say, hey, put me in the biggest companies in the world. In fact, I think the stock market's a little bit on the discount right now. Like there's probably some deals maybe to buy. Jake, talk about the investment freedom opportunity with this, which leads into kind of our second freedom here, which is the ability to invest into multiple asset classes. You're not just tied to just one single like real estate 1031 asset.
So similar to the partnership freedom, where they have the ability to choose to do the next thing together, they don't have to, or to go their separate way. Now, based on the underlying investments or the best asset class at the time, they can also choose what to reinvest in. They don't have to be forced into a like kind asset. They don't have to be forced into the same structure that they had before. There's a number of different ways that with the Deferred Sales Trust, they can own an asset inside of the trust, or they can joint venture with another entity and together own an asset for general partnership tax benefits and a number of other things. So not only can they diversify their underlying assets into what is the best asset at the time, they can also diversify their partners and the structure of how they reinvest.
And that's amazing, right? I mean, that to me, like it takes the stress and the overwhelm from you as the client, and even from us as well as the folks that are helping you to invest these funds. The last thing you want to do is be over concentrated and feel like your entire net worth is tied to one property and one location. I mean, COVID, for example, there was a business owner in New Jersey who literally, they said, you need to shut your doors. Or if you don't shut your doors, you're going to get fined $25,000. I think it was a day, right? and all the stuff that goes on there. But just think about that. The government, and imagine that's his entire livelihood, which it was, and all of his retirement, all of his future, everything he's built up. They can just say all of those, let's say that business is worth $5 million, for example. It's just shut down now and go pound sand because you're going to lose everything or you're going to pay us. Now he fought it, and I think he won in court. Actually, it was kind of a win for freedom. But think about that. If all of your money is in a single asset or a single business, and you're not diversified, or a lot of your equity, and all of your net worth, now we're not only giving you a chance to defer the tax, but then get freedom to diversify that into, let's say Netflix, Apple, Google, Home Depot, Chevron, some of the biggest companies in the world, right? Where a lot would have to go wrong for those companies for your equity to be drained or to be cut a lot, right? That being said, some people are looking more for real estate diversification, which you can do as well. You can put it into real estate funds, passive or active. You can put it into your own deals, which leads into the third freedom, which, Rebecca, I'm going to talk about this one with you, right? Because this is something that's called optimal timing freedom, which is the ability not only to dollar cost average, but also buy and build when you want to. So talk about, Rebecca, you and your husband's strategy of building properties over the years. And sometimes, let's face it, in California, especially in Truckee, it's going to take longer to build, and it's not going to fit these little tiny boxes of the 1031. So talk about your experience with having the ability, and what would it mean for you guys to have optimal timing for investing?
Oh gosh. So yeah, definitely timing wise, there's opportunities that come up every once in a while, especially in the market right now. Ours is pretty stable, but you just never know what's going to happen. So yeah, the ability to be able to sit and wait and not be tied to the 1031 exchange, 90-day, 180-day time frame is huge. And especially maybe not so much buying land, but buying property and fixing it up in this area might be the next. And
also to mention too, a 1031 exchange, maybe you could do equal or greater value. So Rebecca, talk about how you guys would buy land, develop, and then sell. And then you would just pay your tax because you're going to go buy more land, build and sell. It never fit that sell for this and have to buy for this. You're always buying for lower. So talk about that conundrum.
Yeah. So, I mean, we started this process over 25 years ago, bought land for $20,000, built a house, and we kept building up and up and up. And now, land is 500,000. So it's not necessarily makes sense to buy land, but yeah, we kept doing that and buying land, building houses, selling them. And we did have because they were our mostly primary homes, we had the $500,000
121 exclusion,
exclusion. So, but recently we've gotten to the point where we have exceeded that amount. And actually, the house we're living in right now is extremely exceeded that amount. So we're looking at other options, including the Deferred Sales Trust, which we'll definitely do.
Exactly. So that's the key. So understand the problem, right? Like what was Rebecca and her husband trying to solve for, and where were they trying to go, right? And where were they at? And at a certain point, older strategies don't really work at all, right? Or aren't serving what they're looking to do, or putting them actually in a compromised position if they're having to do equal or greater value in a short period of time via the 1031 exchange. Enter the Deferred Sales Trust. Not only can we sell and defer the tax, diversify and be patient, dollar cost average, but also go buy that land and develop the property. This is the coolest thing, right? All tax deferred. Now, the way we do that, in fact, we covered that in the last week's video in very much detail, but short answer is they form a new LLC, and the trust is the joint venture partner in that LLC, and they go buy that land, go develop that project. Incredible. All tax deferred, not using a 1031. And that might mean going through permit process, might mean through, zoning issues, might mean, supply chain issues, right? All of the things that kind of increase the time frame. We have none of that rush because the Deferred Sales Trust has no like-kind replacement or 45-day windows to identify or 180 days to close, which leads into I think it's our third, maybe our fourth freedom now, which is the 1031 exchange freedom, right? In fact, a lot of these freedoms kind of bridge off of this, because the 1031, honestly, it puts a lot of people in a bad position. And we're getting more calls right now with failing 1031 exchange, which, by the way, the Deferred Sales Trust can save a failing 1031 exchange.
Brett, can I just interrupt? I
sure.
want to say that a lot of times, and I get this from a lot of the CPA firm owners who have a bunch of staff CPAs. And they're telling me that now that their firm has more options, including the deferred sales trust and other things, that their CPAs are recommending the 1031 80% less. 80% less than they were before, because now they know that other things can happen and they don't have to try and force a 1031.
It's a great stat to think about, right? And it's sort of like the Blockbuster Netflix, right? Let's just say Blockbuster, first of all, it was like 100% of the time, let's say 25 years ago, right? And at a certain time, it became like 80-20. Like you still went to Blockbuster, but you kind of like getting that DVD out of the red box or the Netflix in the mail. And maybe it was 80-20, but then there's a certain part it just went, and we really believe that the Deferred Sales Trust, there will be a time will not only be a household name, which we're trying to make it that, right, for everybody to get these freedoms, but that it'll essentially get rid of the 1031, especially if the government just gets rid of it or just continues to restrict it more and more. Did you guys know that 1031s used to be worked for business sales? They no longer work for business sales. The Deferred Sales Trust works for business sales. It works for also doesn't work for primary homes. It never actually worked for primary homes. The Deferred Sales Trust works for primary homes, right? It works for cryptocurrency. The 1031 never worked for cryptocurrency. In other words, the 1031 is Blockbuster. Like it's very restrictive. It doesn't necessarily solve what clients are looking for. In fact, the number one question to ask is, would you buy that property, taxes aside, if you had $5 million, let's say, on a property that you have a zero basis on, and you could sell it today, would you buy that property, knowing what you know now, if it wasn't for the tax? And if you hesitate or say no, then why would you 1031 exchange into it, right? Now, what are some of the positives of the 1031 exchange? Because by the way, we do love the 1031 exchange. We do still love Blockbuster, when it makes sense. And there are times to do it. If you can find that deal that actually makes sense, then all day long, do that 1031. You're going to maintain the stepped up basis. You're also going to maintain, it's also going to be very cheap. It's a commodity, right? At this point, you can get an exchange done for $1,000 to $1,500, right? It's actually fairly simple if you have a deal that makes sense. All means go for it, right? Have us as a backup plan as option number 2 for that. But that's only if the deal makes sense and you would have bought it anyways. But what we're seeing right now is interest rates are going higher, in fact, 6.5% on some of these commercial loans, and banks are hard. They're more and more restrictive to get a loan. So is the cap rate making sense? In other words, are you buying at a 5 and borrowing at 6.5 when, let's say a year ago, you were buying like a 4.5 and borrowing at 3.5? So you want to make sure these cash flows in these ratios are making sense. Okay. So that's the 1031 exchange freedom. Jake, you want to add anything else to that?
I do. I know that you want to move on to number 4. However, another point on number 3, the freedom of time, right? We talked about the 1031 and how there are a lot of limitations there, but let's just talk about the stock market. So we had a couple clients a few months ago that asked me, hey, what's your outlook on the market? And I say, well, I have no crystal ball, but I think it's going to keep going down. And, it did, and it's come back up and it's gone back down, et cetera, whatever, right? Because of the DST, does it matter, Brett? If I buy and sell inside, are we going to incur a taxable transaction if I'm buying and selling inside the DST?
The general answer is no. However, it does depend. Go ahead.
I bring that up because it might be the right time to sell and it might be the right time to buy. Normally, people are hesitant because of an immediate, for sure, guaranteed taxable ramification. And that's what I'm getting at, is there are more options with the power of timing. If somebody feels like their stocks are going to continue to plummet, they can go ahead and liquidate, put in T-bills and hold it, and then jump back in when things are ramping back up. And so it does give an immense power to time where the hesitation to sell because of taxes isn't always as pertinent.
Very well said. And before we go on to some more freedoms, I want to give you a couple things to think about, like what to do and why to do it. Okay. And so what to do, and I'm calling these the 3 C's and T's, the 3 C's and T's, right? And C stands for cash flow and T stands for tax flow. Okay. And so I want you to think about a triangle, and you need these 3 things if you're going to achieve a deferred sales trust, transformational exit plan. If you have these 3 C's and T's, and the first thing is C stands for capital. So I'm still working this out. I think that's even better. Capital and tax flow mindset. A capital and tax flow mindset. What does that mean? It's not just cash flow, but it's also capital, which means what? Assets that are appreciating, assets that have cash flow, assets that have basically ways to build wealth. And you've also got to have on that same side a tax flow mindset where it's not just a one size fits all. It's not just in a Rubik's Cube with one side that's all the way, congruent. You're going to have challenges with your tax flow, with your cash flow, with maybe your estate tax, with your depreciation schedules. As the world changes and advances, you got to have a team of professionals that are going to help you get this congruent as possible. And that starts with having a mindset that's not only focused on what your capital is doing for preservation and growth, but also what the tax flow situation is. And so to Jake's point, what he's saying is the trust itself, let's say, has 10 million and it's buying and selling out of different stocks and different investments. Generally speaking, it operates at a loss. And the reason is because it's able to expense to Jake what it owes to Jake. In other words, Jake doesn't own the trust. If Jake was the note holder, he'd be he lent the money to the trust. And therefore, this trust owes him typically 10 million plus 8% compounding, which is 800,000. Jake may or may not be receiving this $800,000 in a given year. It could be delayed for a couple of years. And that means the trust is able to expense it, even if it hasn't paid him out. And so it might be buying and trading stocks and different things within the trust. And therefore, it doesn't incur any gain, if you will, in the sense of out exceeding its expenses. Okay. So having a capital and tax flow mindset will say, not only how can I grow my wealth and get cash flow, but also how do I make sure that I'm not incurring huge tax with the vehicle? This is the same reason you do IRAs, 401ks, 1031 exchanges, right? So having that mindset and being creative with the solution, that is the first part of the C and T. Jake, you want to expand on what I'm thinking or what might be a good thing to add to that?
I think you've done a fantastic job in the sense that it's not always the rate of return that matters. And it's not always saving the taxes that matters. You don't want to roll over into an asset that's not right for you now, just for the taxes. And you don't want to just forget about the taxes and shoot for the moon with your rates of return. You need to have an equilibrium and a balanced approach. And going way back to what you were saying earlier on, what are your goals and objectives? Why are you investing? What is that investment going to be used for in the future? All of those things are incredibly important, and it helps you get out of the traditional mindset that you might have been stuck in from before. And then when you get a team of people around you that are unbiased and don't have ulterior motives and incentives, like, we can truly open up and liberate you to be able to make decisions that make most sense for you.
Yep. Which leads into the second C and T, which is capital gains tax DST machine. And so I'm thinking of a better way to put it, but you need the product, right? You need the actual strategy. You need the actual system. You need the actual tool. And that's where the Deferred Sales Trust, by the way, if you're curious, thousands of closes, billions under management, tens of thousands of tax returns, over 20 no change formal and regular audits. It's a perfect track record, lifetime audit defense to provide it. Jake and I are just kind of like the nurses, the advanced brain surgeon, if you will. He's the tax attorney CPA. He created it. He's a genius. And we just have learned from him over the years and been able to share this. But that being said, you need the machine. You actually need the strategy that's proven, right? And that's been vetted and that's been tested. And that is simply what if you want to take next steps. You schedule a one-on-one consultation with Jake or I, and we go through the strategy and we see if it's a good fit. It's all no cost, right? As long as you have $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. Number two, we actually look at your sale that you're selling, right? And making sure that we time it and we set everything up properly. We open up the bank accounts for the trust or the TD Ameritrade Charles Schwab accounts. We propose and you propose and Jake proposes opportunities to invest post-close. Then we work with the escrow company essentially to make sure the documents are all set up. And then you close the trust. The funds are invested. You get 24/7 access to view the funds online. Nothing without your approval. So you need the mechanics of that, and you need the team to help you execute that. Right? That's really important. And that's the second C and T. And of course, if you're in a 1031, we can save that too. But remember, everything else needs to be set up prior to the close of escrow, and prior to the buyer moving all contingencies. In fact, we're working with the deal right now, talking with the gentlemen's, two gentlemen partners. Their financial advisor brought the deal in, self-storage facility. It's on the East Coast, and they have about 30 days to close. And so I was asking, well, has the buyer removed all contingencies? And they said, maybe, maybe not. I got to find that out. Number two, if he has a debt over basis, we're going to have to either do a partial 1031 Delaware. And so we're working those things out. So timing is really cool, really important. But what I encourage you is to get the team together. We'd love to be a part of that dream team and to make sure everything's lined up properly. In case you want to take action, I'm gonna see if Pierce is available at this point to jump in and opine on this. Pierce,
Sure.
Pierce, anything else you want to add to just getting everything set up for people that are considering the deferred sales trust?
I think timing is super important. Setting it up, you kind of alluded to it already, but setting things up before the last minute is critical so that you can structure, things the right way, and not feel like rushed into it. It takes time to get to know us and, get your other professionals on board with what's going on and get them comfortable. So the timing of things and making sure that, you're doing things well in ahead of just, hey, I'm selling the property in 2 weeks is pretty critical.
Yeah. And Pierce too, do we like bringing other CPAs in and talking with them and educating them?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's part of the team mindset that we have. It's more of, people here aren't trying to step on toes or take business away from other people. We're here to enhance and come alongside your team and work with them and, just add to it.
Yep.
Not
in fact,
take away.
CPAs keep all the business. We don't do any of the personal business tax returns. We only do the deferred sales trust return and the setup there. And in fact, we have a third party that does that as well. Good. So that's the second C&T. And the last C&T would be the capital and tax flow multipliers, right? So what are ways to make the deferred sales trust an investment and not an expense, and make it not only a 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x return on your investment? Because the trust has expenses. You got to hire myself, and you got to hire like Jake Miller as a financial advisor, and then there's the tax attorney, and there's expenses to the trust. And so you got to figure out what are the multipliers and how do you activate those multipliers to make it an exponential return on your money? Because it's not just the 25 to 50% capital gains and depreciation or capture money that's working for you. Now it's how do you tap into ways to not only grow your cash flow and appreciation, but also your tax flow and depreciation. And now one of the best multipliers, I believe, is buying real estate when it makes sense. And when you do that with the trust as an active GP, guess what? You're able to get a new depreciation schedule on that asset, of which you get about 80% of the depreciation. Again, if you're an active GP owning the LLC with the trust as a silent partner and buying the asset. And let's say you bought a multifamily property, for example, for $5 million. Let's imagine you had a $10 million trust and you buy the property all cash, but you buy that property when it was worth 5 versus maybe today it's still worth 6, right? So you wait about a year and you negotiate, and rates keep going higher, sellers get shaky, and finally you can make a deal at 5. So hopefully right there, you just captured $1 million, which is a multiplier for your wealth. Why? Because you didn't 1031 exchange it and pay that 6 because what you were buying in that short window. So you've just multiplied your wealth by $1 million because you waited and you bought low. So hopefully that's the first way you did it. But number 2, let's imagine you had a 0 basis on the previous asset that you had sold, which means your 1031 exchange would have traveled that basis, which means what? You have no depreciation on that new asset. That's a bummer, right? That means your tax flow is very low. That means all of the cash flow coming off that's getting taxed. In fact, I have a client right now. I sold his apartment complex like eight years ago. And I wanted to sell his other one. I said, you should sell your other one. And he goes, Brent, it's such a great property. I go, I know, that's exactly why you should sell it. And I go, tell me about the depreciation. He's like, it's 0. And I go, I think it's worth 10 million. He's like, 10 million. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I'm making about $500,000, but I'm living in California. I'm getting hammered with tax. I said, look, we should sell at 10 million. We should deferred sales trust. We can go buy the property next door for 10 million with the deferred sales trust and get you a brand new depreciation schedule. Now, he still hasn't become a believer yet. Sometimes the profit in his own town takes a little bit longer, and I just keep closing deals. And it's a really great asset. And he had no real motivation to sell, right? It was turnkey, great location. Everything's going well, except for he didn't like that he was getting taxed on the cash flow without the depreciation. But just to bring this to full life, right? He could choose a 1031 and have an old tax flow, or he could use a capital and tax flow multiplier and partner with the trust on a new LLC and buy a new asset and get 80% of the tax flow depreciation offset. And that's the part where, you're going, whoa, my head's spinning, Brett. This is where we're going to help you, right? We're going to help you form an LLC, buy that asset, just like if you were to form an LLC, and let's say Rebecca had the LLC, and let's say Gordon was the silent partner, and Rebecca's like, I found a $10 million apartment complex in Truckee. It's amazing. And Gordon's like, great, I'll put up the $4 million down payment. Rebecca's like, I'll do all the work. And that scenario, they could work out a structure where it's a partnership. And then but it's brand new money coming to a brand new deal. That's the way the deferred sales trust works. And this is how it becomes a multiplier, because in an old structure, the old LLC would have to have 1031 into it. And that means the old depreciation schedule travels with you, which is not good. So I'm going to pause there. I want to call on and open up for questions right now. I'm going to test Rebecca to make sure she has that, because it's so important here in a minute. But I'll see if Gordon or Esther or Praveen or Sylvia or Patel or Sam or Eddie, does anyone have any questions or thoughts on anything? You can put that in the chat. You can also unmute yourself. And then if not, then Rebecca's up in about 20 seconds to answer that, or really just to see if she understands.
I have a question for you.
Yes. Pierce,
That property you're just talking about where he's making 500 grand, I'm assuming that was annually, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's at 10 million. If he were to sell at 10 million, how much more could he cash flow from the 500,000 that he was making?
Jake, what are the general returns on if 10 million under management? What do you, and assuming it's a, moderate to higher risk tolerance, what do you think? I think you're on mute, so I can't quite hear you. So you might have to.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I apologize. So shoot, you're asking me for something that I'm not really supposed to give exactly like that. But if you were to ask me what we've historically done for some people in that moderate category, recently in the market, a lot of things have just traditionally been going down if somebody invested 1 year ago. If you have a more complex strategy that involves callers, puts, straddles, futures, other commodities in with your index funds, your ETFs, and your mutual funds, you actually make money when things are moving down, right? So it's really hard to give you an estimate. But if you want me just to shoot in the dark, I would say that in that area, it's 10 to 12%.
And that's over probably a 10-year period of time. It doesn't mean every single year is going to be exactly that. Some years can be a little bit higher, some years a little bit lower.
Now, if we say a 10-year period, Brett, we can be a little bit healthier than that. Over a 10-year period, we're definitely looking closer to like a 14 to 16 with those features that I mentioned.
Right. But none of this is guarantee or promise, right? It's subject to marketplace. The DST is not a magic to get higher investment returns. But these are the opportunities that are available. And so, yeah, not only is he maximizing his tax flow, right, if he were to go buy real estate at a discount later on, but he's also he's multiplying, I guess is a better way. He's multiplying his cash flow. In fact, the average deal, and in fact, we should do a study on this, Jake and Pierce and Rebecca. The average deal I found so far is somewhere between 40 and 60% increase in cash flow. 40 to 60%. So I just did a deal up in Placerville, California. I sold the asset. It was 15 units. They basically had no debt. And so their equity is about 2.35 after closing cost. Their NOI was about 120. And that's net operating income, income minus expenses, right? Was their NOI. And we were projecting 180 to 190 basically on 2.35. which is about 188, right? 188 on 2.35. So if you take 188, or you take 120,000 by 188, that's a 63% increase, right? Pretty cool, right? So they're going, I can sell, I can defer my tax, I can get a 60+% increase on my cash flow. I can get out of California, I can get out of rent control, and I can also buy if I want to later on. They're like, Brett, this is incredible. Let's go, right? And that unlocked the freedoms for them to sell. Otherwise, they weren't selling. They're getting calls from all the brokers, all the people. And I called them and just laid out those freedoms, right? I said, what are you trying to achieve? And what freedoms can we deliver with the Deferred Sales Trust? And let's go execute that. So, Rebecca, are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So talk to me, like how do we get a new depreciation schedule by partnering with the Deferred Sales Trust? You know, I just sold the property for 10 million. It's sitting there. Talk to me about multiplying my tax flow and depreciation schedule as well as my cash flow.
Oh gosh, you're going to have to answer that one because that's a little over the top for me this morning. Sorry.
That's all right. Pierce. I know Jake can answer it. So Pierce, how do I multiply my tax flow and my cash flow through new depreciation with the Deferred Sales Trust? And why can't I just do a 1031 to do that?
Sure. Well, when you do a 1031, your depreciation schedule travels with you. So if you have, bought a property for $1 million and you've had it for, 20 years or whatever, you're over halfway done depreciating that thing if you haven't done a cost seg study. And if you've accelerated it, you're probably even further along. So if you 1031, that travels with you. So that, let's say you have $300,000 remaining on your depreciation schedule, that 700,000 you've already used is gone.
Yep.
When you do a deferred sales trust, because you're actually selling the property, the depreciation schedule doesn't travel because you've actually changed title and you've moved on. So when you go buy a different property, it's not tied to that past property. And so you get a brand new depreciation schedule like you would if you bought a brand new building.
Good. Yeah. You actually really simplified it. That's great. And now, Pierce, do you get the full depreciation schedule or do you only get a part of it per the LLC?
So depending upon your unique situation, you'd want to talk to the attorneys about how to structure, and Brett and Jake about how to structure everything. But typically you can structure it in a variety of ways. And if it is most beneficial to you to take up to 80% of the depreciation, then that's the way we'd structure 20% to the LLC. The trust would get, 20% and the rest would flow through to you. I think that's commercially reasonable. There might be a situation where you go less depending upon, what's going on inside of your own personal financial situation.
Yeah, that's really well said. Yeah, depending on the investment and how it was structured, generally speaking, about 80% can go to you personally without putting any money in, and the trust puts up all the money for the down payment. But you're doing the sweat equity, you're finding the deal. I mean, you're putting all your expertise in, you're signing on the loan. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's involved there. So it's not like you're getting something for nothing, but we got to follow the depreciation to go to you, mostly 80 and then 20 to the trust. So yeah, again, we covered this in the last episode, so you can learn more about that in detail. So great job, Pierce. Rebecca, so if I do a 1031 exchange, do I get a new depreciation schedule or an old one?
No, it follows you to the new property.
So if I buy that same property, with the Deferred Sales Trust, do I get a new one?
Sure do.
Great.
Yeah.
Would that increase?
Sold one and buying
a brand new one. I didn't trade it and have a continuation strategy, which is what the 1031 is. I actually exited with the Deferred Sales Trust and then formed a new entity and bought with new money and new property. Right. Exactly. So you see how that became a multiplier for my tax flow, right? And it also perhaps became a multiplier for my capital, because guess what? I probably maybe bought that property a little bit of a discount because I practiced one of the optimal timing freedoms, right? One of the freedoms of the DST, which is optimal timing. And I bought well. Does that make sense, Rebecca?
It certainly does. Yep.
There it is. Well, good job today. Who else has any questions or thoughts for us? Happy to answer when we're talking about the 10 freedoms of the Deferred Sales Trust. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxswitch.com, where you can learn more about all of these things and download the free ebook. You can also find the Jake Miller at strategictaxsolutions.com. He's the financial advisor extraordinaire. Pierce York has Kingdom Luxury YouTube channel, and he's a luxury and commercial agent down in the Newport Beach area. Any other questions or thoughts from the panel? And Rebecca Munson, by the way, is in Truckee, Lake Tahoe. She's a luxury real estate agent up there, also part of the team that we have with real estate. So anyone else have questions, thoughts, a live deal?
I think I'll just throw out there, Brett, that that we do occasionally get people that come to us and we tell them that the deferred sales trust is not right for them. So this is not something that we force either. In fact, occasionally it makes sense to combine the deferred sales trust with other strategies. And we know it well enough inside and out that we can recommend what other strategies fit well with the deferred sales trust.
Yeah, I guess that could be the 11th freedom, if you will. And we haven't gone through the rest of them, but it could be an add-on that it plays well with others, right? It doesn't have to be one or all or none, right? It could be a partial 1031 exchange. It could be a partial Delaware 1031 exchange, or also known as a Delaware statutory trust, and a deferred sales trust. In fact, Jake and I just closed a deal where they had a debt over basis issue. And in fact, he's helping another financial advisor do a debt over basis deal too, with one part of our strategic alliances up in Washington for a financial advisor. He's also named Jake Carpenter. I think he's here with us today. That being said, yes, it works with other strategies, and sometimes it's not a one size fits all just with the deferred sales trust. In fact, we actually had 2 deferred sales trusts, and 2 weeks ago we did a DVST 1.0 versus 2.0. It's a little plug there. You're going to want to check that out. That talks about estate tax, and it talks about ways to grow your wealth and multiply your capital for the legacy play. But yes, great mention, Jake. So get with us early to make sure we're mapping and planning all of that out. That being said, anyone else have questions or thoughts? We are up against the hour here, and so we covered a lot too. And your brains are probably really full, hopefully. And you're just challenged, right? Because that's what we want to do. We want to challenge, we want to encourage. Looks like we might have a question here. We can try and use the deferred sales trust for buy-side M&A to win over sellers to beat out our competition. Yeah, it's a great point you make, Eddie. Because at the end of the day, as a buyer of another company, not only are you looking to, perhaps make a competitive offer when price, but you're also trying to make it in better terms. So the question is for the seller that you're trying to purchase from is, how do you make your offer as attractive to them so they choose you versus somebody else? Now, some people can just pay the highest price, but what if you could help them defer 25 to 50% of the gain? So they're going to net more at closing via the deferred sales trust. That means you might offer a little bit lower. So let's say it's a $10 million business purchase. And let's say they would have had a zero basis and they're in California. They would have paid $4 million of tax approximately, right? So they would have netted 6. Well, what if you can approach them and say, I know everyone else is offering you 10, 10, 10, and 10, right? Maybe even 11 million. But guess what? What if we structured it in a way and brought to the table something that instead of, selling at 10 and netting 6, that you could sell at 10 and that your trust can net 10, the trust can net 10. So that's an extra $4 million in the trust that's paying you back over time. And they'd say, you know what, that sounds probably more attractive. How about and you say, well, here's the deal. We'll sell it to you for 9. We'll buy it for 9. Or buy it for 9.5. In other words, it gives you a chance to negotiate a little bit lower, because even if you offered 9, that's still an extra 3, right? Because it's 9 instead of 6. It's not just a mathematical equation. So yeah, you want to look at it from every perspective, and you want to say, how do I solve their problem? How do I help them get to their B, right? A is where they're at. They want to sell. They want to net a good price. They want good terms. And B is where they're going to end up. Well, you want to be that bridge. You want to bring that idea, that unique solution, and then hopefully win the deal. So Eddie, hopefully that answers the question that you had. I think it's a great question or thought or comment. So yes, that being said, Jake, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
strategictaxsolutions.com, 1-800-773-1848.
Rebecca Munson, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
RebeccaMunson.com, 530-448-9740.
Excellent. And Mr. Pierce York, people want to get in touch with you, where can they check you out?
You can go to kingdomluxuryrealty.com. I can also find me on the podcasts, Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast.
Expert CRE Secrets podcast and the Kingdom Luxury Real Estate YouTube channel. So awesome. And if people want to find me, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and you can download our free ebook. I want to thank everyone for participating, for listening, for watching this. I encourage you to please rate, review, subscribe. Please share this with someone who could literally change their life. It can unlock them from selling their business, their crypto. By the way, next week, we're talking all about FTX and what's going on, what's happened and the disaster that it is, and how the Deferred Sales Trust is positioned to help future people who are selling cryptocurrency and don't want to face a disaster which just happened. So look for that talk. All next week is going to be heavily focused on crypto and how to go back into real estate, how to protect yourself and diversify. So look for that. But you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to get started. You can go to our YouTube channel, and you can also check out the new book. We're actually getting very, very close. I know I've said the next 30 days, but I really believe it's the next 30 days this time. It's called Building a Tax-Deferred Exit Strategy. We have the Jake Miller, financial advisor, in the book. We also have the Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. I got a few chapters as well. Check that out. Building a Tax-Deferred Exit Strategy, coming to Amazon real soon. Thanks so much for watching and listening, everybody. And we will talk to you again soon. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Yep.